All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are unpacking a really massive, action-packed stretch of recent municipal and school board meetings for MSAD #51. We're going to take all those complex district decisions, the passionate community debates, and the dense administrative moves and break the whole shebang down into a clear, engaging overview.
Now, if you've ever wondered what local democracy actually looks like on the ground, well, it looks a lot like marathon summer meetings pushing deep into the night. The board absolutely powered through a heavy docket recently, really having to balance strict legal mandates with some very intense community passions. So we're going to give you a highly digestible, completely neutral summary of the major actions they took. But more importantly, we're going to zero in on those exact friction points between the board and the public and talk about exactly how those controversies were resolved.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for today. First, the board's major actions. Then, budget and facility upgrades. Third, the new cell phone policy. Fourth, early childhood special ed. And finally, staffing and committee shifts.
Starting right off with Section 1, the board's major actions.
So 3 really foundational actions were authorized right out of the gate. First up, and honestly this is probably the most crucial, they approved a brand new 4-year strategic priorities plan. This officially replaces the district's outdated model, basically giving administrators a crystal clear compass for the next 4 years. Second, they authorized a comprehensive long-term facilities plan, which pulls all those scattered summer construction and maintenance projects into one unified, transparent document. And third, they formally committed to participating in regional Greater Portland Council of Governments, or GPCOG meetings, just to start exploring how they might share resources with neighboring districts.
Moving right along to Section 2, budget and facility upgrades.
Let's talk about the numbers. The FY27 budget represents a $4.1 million increase, which brings the total district budget to just under $58 million. Now, the biggest driver here? MSAD #51 is actually one of the few districts in the entire state with steadily growing enrollment. So to support those kids, a really impressive 73.5% of these funds are going directly into classrooms. To put that into perspective, the state average is only 69.2%. Oh, and you'll probably also notice the one campus project debt service accounts for a net increase of roughly $666,000.
But as you can imagine, a budget of this size doesn't just sail through without pushback. During public comment, several residents voiced some real concerns about balancing the taxpayer burden with the administration's requests. One resident in particular challenged the addition of 2 new staff members, feeling they just weren't justified by enrollment increases alone, and actually suggested that leadership structures should be reevaluated first. So the board's primary challenge here was figuring out how to balance this very real taxpayer fatigue against the operational needs of a district that is, literally, growing by the day.
And this tension really reached a boiling point over end-of-year cost center transfers. By state law, the board does have the authority to move unspent funds between different operational buckets at the end of the year. So funds were shifted around, but the big one was a massive $500,000 moved from special education directly over into facilities maintenance to cover some unexpected infrastructure costs.
This brilliantly illustrates the friction we so often see between municipal management and community perception. Take this citizen's comment, for example. Even while acknowledging that absolutely nothing illegal or improper was happening, they essentially said, hey, if voters approve funds for a specific category, that is exactly where those funds should stay. It's that classic conflict, right? The rigid intent of the voters versus the very fluid day-to-day reality of keeping a massive school district running.
So how did they resolve this? Well, the board took a clear 3-step approach. First, they openly acknowledged the community's desire for transparency and validated those concerns. They heard them. Second, they confirmed on the official record that these transfers are a completely legal, standard accounting practice that's just necessary for a district of this size. And finally, they voted to pass the transfers, ensuring that essential facilities maintenance didn't fall behind.
All right, Section 3, the cell phone policy. The board officially introduced Policy JICJ. This completely replaces older, softer rules with a strict bell-to-bell ban on personal electronic devices. Yes, that includes smartwatches, and what's really fascinating here is that while there's currently this massive statewide push driven by the governor for this exact type of mandate, MSAD #51 was actually already proactively developing this restriction before their hand was even forced.
However, actually enforcing the policy, that sparked a pretty heated debate. The central controversy really boiled down to storage. Option A meant writing strict, uniform storage rules directly into board policy, essentially mandating exactly how phones must be locked away district-wide. Option B, on the other hand, meant giving building administrators the discretion to figure out the absolute best storage methods for their specific schools and their specific students.
So what was the verdict? The board ultimately went with option B. They decided to trust their building administrators and school tech teams to handle the rollout and monitor compliance. The devices still must be turned off and stored, no question about that, but the how is left up to the principals. And to resolve the anxiety of some board members who really wanted stricter rules, they built in a safety net. They explicitly stated they would monitor the rollout closely and retain the right to tighten the policy up later if giving administrators that discretion just wasn't working out.
Section 4. Early Childhood Special Education. This part was incredible to watch because the board actively workshopped this policy in real time. Their initial motion, which just proposed opening 6 pre-K classrooms, was legally and logistically insufficient, so the board actually recommended voting down their own first draft. Crazy, right? Then, they built a revised motion, totally from scratch, right there at the table, and that one passed. It allowed for up to 6 classrooms, specified a half-day model utilizing community partners, and explicitly cemented that the student's IEP team makes the sole legal determination for placement.
This revised motion was honestly a masterclass in compromise. The board had to navigate incredibly strict legal requirements for FAPE, that's Free Appropriate Public Education, as well as child fine laws. At the same time, they had to balance the community's intense desire for full-day care against the district's actual operational limits by partnering with local child care providers. But above all, they successfully protected the legal authority of the IEP teams to do exactly what is best for each individual child.
And finally, Section 5, Staffing and Committee Shifts. Several key administrative housekeeping items got checked off the list. The new Pre-K-1 building was officially named the Carolyn F. Small School, which really honors some deep community input. In a pretty major structural move, the Equity Committee was shifted from a board-level oversight committee to an administrative-level committee, which helped streamline the board's focus. And finally, the board elected its new leadership, with Kim Vine stepping up as the new board chair.
We also saw a really interesting resolution regarding the hiring timeline for a new elementary assistant principal. There was definitely some friction and hesitation among some board members about approving a mid-year start date in January. You know, lots of transitional and financial concerns with doing it that way. But the conflict was elegantly resolved when the candidate's start date was simply moved to September. It aligned perfectly with the academic year, completely eased the board's anxieties, and ended up resulting in a unanimous vote of approval.
To wrap up our summary today, I have to highlight this incredibly candid quote from the superintendent. This goes back to those GPCOG regional meetings we mentioned at the very start. When discussing sharing resources with neighboring districts, he noted that districts frequently walk to the edge of something and then you walk away from it. It exposes that common political friction we literally see everywhere. I mean, everyone loves the idea of saving money by sharing resources, but when confronted with the reality of actually consolidating offices or services, people get nervous and back out. It is going to be absolutely fascinating to see if MSAD #51 actually takes the leap.
Which brings us to our final thought. The board has laid the groundwork. They've passed the budget, enacted the cell phone bans, navigated complex special education laws, and set their new 4-year strategic priorities plan. The heavy lifting of the summer is done, but the actual execution, that's just beginning. So I leave you with this question. How are you going to stay engaged with your local government and schools as these massive changes take effect? Get involved, stay curious, and keep learning. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.